Welcome to the Accidental Experts podcast. I'm your host, Bryce Hamilton. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and a child and family therapist. I have been in practice for over 15 years, and I'm also a mom of 4. So I know the challenges both professionally and personally. I'm so glad that you're here today to grow your parenting toolbox. Please come as you are and be ready to learn. My goal is to make you the accidental expert so that you can raise healthy humans. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I'm so glad you're with us today. So we're going to be talking about adolescent male mental health, specifically depression, something I think that we definitely need to spend some more time talking about, because this is a topic. We have a lot of suicides happening. People are dying by suicide in this adolescent age group. I think the age is 18 to 30 is the biggest age group that is dying by suicides for males. And we want to do something about that. So today we're going to be talking to an expert, Ethan Getchell, and he's going to share his personal experience. He's also a social worker and therapist, and he's going to share his clinical experience to help us do our best job as parents to help our boys through these years. With that, let's get to Ethan.
Thanks for having me.
Yes. So we're going to be talking about this topic that I think is so incredibly important. And I think we're talking more about men's mental health and especially teenage male mental health, but I still think that we have a ways to go.
Absolutely.
So go ahead.
I was going to jump in. There are 3 areas that I really love talking about. It's this men's mental health, young men specifically, but then suicide prevention. And I think all 3 kind of intersect really well, but they're also separate and different conversations that we can dive into today. So
Yeah. So thank you for being here, because I think this is just such an important topic. I'm a mom I have 4 kids, but 2 of them are boys. And so this is something that I am passionate about as well, because I want to do whatever I can to help support my kids. And if there's something that we can do as parents, I want to know what that is, and I want to do the best that I can. So thank you.
I love it.
Yeah. Okay. So tell us a little bit about why are you so passionate about men's mental health, young men's mental health, and also suicide prevention?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'm an oldest brother. I have 2 younger brothers. So growing up, it was a house full of boys. So I really get it, on a personal level. And then went to college, got my bachelor's degree in business and communication. So really have this understanding of marketing and getting messaging out there, and growing up being exposed to maybe some not so great messaging around what mental health looks like. So wanting to kind of change that, and then to have my own story that we'll get into and lean into this pillar of vulnerability and want to share about losing my brother. And so really trying to be on the front end of vulnerability, sharing my story, talking about mental health, men's mental health, and doing that on a personal level, but then also professional, working as a clinical social work fellow now.
Yes, which is so amazing. Congratulations on your accomplishment, because we need people like you in our field, and it's quite an ordeal. People don't realize how much effort it takes to become a therapist either.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. So let's talk about how depression in teen boys sometimes looks different than teenage girls, but then also different than maybe adult depression or, mental health concerns.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the first things that I learned was this difference in depression. I heard it first by Terrence Real, I think it was, talk about covert versus overt depression, and that overt nature really being the kind of traditional sense of depression. Now we get the feeling blue, the down, the isolating, the being quiet. And then there's this covert depression nature that looks different, and it can show up in this form of workaholism and really obsessing in a passion or a hobby. And that doesn't look like that traditional sense of depression. And so I think one of the first things is realizing that depression does look different between adult men, young men, men and women. So once we see that, then we can start to get into, okay, I'm noticing these things. Now what can I do about it?
Mm-hmm. What other things are we looking for? What might be symptoms or things that people might not notice or parents might miss that we want them to be aware? Because I think we know generally what depression looks like, but let's also talk about classic depression.
Yeah, yeah. Classically, you're looking for a lack of interest in hobbies. You're looking for that low mood. Uh, Use the screener SIGI cap. So you're looking at sleep, interest, guilt, energy level, concentration, appetite, and sense of purpose. And so you can go through all those things. How are they sleeping at night? How are they eating? What is their concentration level at? Energy level? Do they feel like they have a sense of purpose with their friends, with their family, in their community? So those are kind of the traditional pieces that we look for when we're talking about depression broadly.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think parents might miss? Like, what are the things, like, can we talk a little bit more about this covert depression and like what kind of things we might not attribute besides really pouring ourselves into things that, like we're probably not just like having a really intense hobby. It's not just like, okay, I'm super into football right now, I'm like doing everything around that. Is it also like not taking care of the other parts? Like, is it letting schoolwork fall behind, or do we not notice that in that type of covert depression?
Yeah, I think it's really difficult because they say 80% of people who die by suicide, they show some kind of indication. They either have a mental health illness, or they have expressed some concerns, or they've demonstrated some of these symptoms that we've been talking about. But then that leaves like 20 to 30% of people who never really show any signs. And that really just highlights the complexity of this issue. And so I think when I look at like the preventative side, it's about having these conversations before you're seeing these symptoms, because they may not be expressing the symptoms, even if they're having these thoughts or feelings. And even if they're not, and we can get into some of the impulsivity and risk taking of young men, especially. But if there's not this prolonged sense of depression that they're feeling, but they have a bad day and they don't have that sense of emotional regulation, then it's just a quick, like, oh, I want to go punch a wall. But instead, they choose something that's much more finite. And so having those conversations on the front end, not being scared of mental health conversations, being comfortable with getting uncomfortable, saying, I'm human too. Here are times when I've felt sad, angry. Here's how I managed, and demonstrating that. I think that's an important piece on the prevention side, on the proactive piece.
Yeah. Well, and I think, there is definitely still a stigma or misrepresentation that talking about suicide or talking about mental health challenges are going to cause people to have suicidal thoughts or attempt suicide or complete suicide, or that they would get the idea to be depressed then, or
Mm-hmm.
would get the idea to be anxious. But we've really refuted that in the research, and I know in my own practice talking about it, actually there is like a sense of like right, like not always, because then it
Mm-hmm.
also starts a new conversation, but like at first it's like, okay, somebody else knows, I don't have to keep this to myself, like I can share it. um and maybe that person can help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hear a lot. I've had conversations about this idea of traditional masculinity and toxic masculinity, and I don't really fall on the extremes of it. I think there are pros and cons to everything, and I'm really, I think, passionate about looking at those pros and cons and not trying to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think there's some
Mhm.
really strong pillars of masculinity that we can lean into, traditional masculinity that we can call on. But I think there are these pieces of, what are the two emotions that men feel like they're allowed or comfortable expressing, and it's anger and apathy. And so if
Mhm.
you're growing up in a space where the only two emotions that are comfortable are anger and apathy, then that's not going to communicate very much on what's going on inside. And then that's how you lead to, oh, I had no idea this happened. It came out of nowhere. Well, they
Mhm.
just didn't have that comfort level. And we didn't lean into that as role models, lean into that discomfort of the other emotions outside of anger and apathy.
Yeah. Well, or how to handle them, right? So like, and something I feel like in my practice I'm talking to parents a lot about is demonstrating, you go to the store and they don't have something. It's like, wow, that's frustrating. And then what are you going to do to problem solve it? So they don't have broccoli. That was like the vegetable that your kids eat or whatever. It's like, how are we going to pivot here? What are we going to do to solve that problem? But then I think, without bringing our kids into maybe adult sized problems, we can still talk about, like, I was really frustrated with a coworker today, or I was sad when I learned that my favorite person at work is leaving, or I'm like feeling anxious about the new neighbors moving in, or whatever it is that's happening. We can vocalize that to our kids because we often are having that internal dialogue, but they don't have the privilege of hearing the internal dialogue, right? So we have to externalize it.
Yeah, I've recently been having conversations with a group of clients I've been working with. I just noticed this theme of anger, and so I've been doing a lot of kind of psychoeducation with my supervisors on this specific emotion of anger and viewing it as a secondary emotion and what are the emotions behind it, and
Yes.
whether that's fear or whatever else. So okay, if I'm communicating with anger and I'm noticing this anger in myself, and I recognize, okay, it's often a secondary emotion because it's helpful for communicating, for protecting ourselves.
Mhm.
If I can get behind that, what's really behind it. Okay, I'm feeling fear in this situation. Okay, how can I be vulnerable, share that, and help connect that for someone who's watching, like your son or daughter, child, friends.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I love that you say that because that's what I say too, is anger is kind of a protecting emotion because it allows you to push the things out, right? Like we can blame other people, we can put it on, we can like externalize that part, like we can demonstrate that
Mhm.
piece. But a lot of the other emotions are inside, which feels really uncomfortable when you're scared or worried or nervous or sad. I mean, there's a lot of other emotions, but like those ones all are like inside. And so then, it's easier to demonstrate. But I think socially, we seem
Mhm.
to accept anger
Mhm.
for males, especially more easily. Why?
Mhm.
I don't really understand because it doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. I would rather somebody be like, I'm really nervous about this. And then we work through that part, but we're just not there yet. And we're working towards that. But yeah, I think that that's hard. And there's a psychiatrist, Dr. K, and
Mhm.
I listened to one of his podcast episodes and he was talking about, um, it was just like men's mental health. And I was like, that's a topic I want to know more about. And so I was listening to this and I thought it was so interesting because I haven't had this experience being a woman, is that, when boys are young, they're like told, don't cry. Like, don't be a baby. Like, don't be a sissy, whatever that like way to like reject that sadness, the way that they're expressing that. So then they kind of stop doing that, or they're told, like, stand up for yourself, like, fight for yourself, right? Like, stop them from doing that. So then that like amplifies the anger,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
so then, they're allowed to feel happy and they're allowed to feel angry. And
Mhm.
then as we grow up into adults, if we're like punching things and hitting people and whatever like anger may be demonstrating, throwing things, breaking things, yelling, then we're looked at as abusive. So
Mhm.
then the only emotion men have left is happiness. And that is absurd because no one just has happiness. I mean, I would love to live in the world of only happiness, I think. I'm not sure. I mean, all the emotions have value, but like I I don't, that's not possible. It's not possible
Mhm.
to just be happy. And so then to put that expectation of like you are just going to be happy
Mhm.
is, I can imagine how that just like turns men in. Like, I have to shut down. I can't feel this. It's not allowed.
Mhm. Yeah, I also enjoy listening to Dr. K. I think he has the Building the Healthy Gamer
Yes.
program, and
Yes.
yeah, I love how he takes things to a very practical level. He's looking at like systems and mechanisms, and so thinking about anger as a system, as a mechanism, like it has worked in the past because it communicates and it protects you, and
Mhm.
tying it back into that covert versus overt nature. Someone who's extremely angry could be dealing with depression symptoms, and their only way of feeling like they can communicate that is with anger. So
Yeah.
going back to that question of like, what can we be looking for? It's anger is one of them. It doesn't fit on that traditional
Mhm.
assessment of what depression looks like, but anger in young men could be one of those kind of covert symptoms to look for in
Yeah.
depression.
Yeah. Totally. Okay, so I mean, on that space of like anger, sometimes it doesn't get to the level. It's like just irritable. Like they're just super short with you potentially, right? And like, and then also potentially withdraw. And so I'm thinking like, okay, so there's like you look at teenage development. Like it is normal for or expected for a teenager to kind of prioritize friends, to prioritize other activities, sports, school, job, right? And then family, maybe, when we're young is like our priority. We're spending all of our time with our family. And I mean, we're still doing sports, but like not as independently, right? Our parents are all taking us to the practices and all the events. So like part of that is normal, right? Or like expected in development is withdraw. But then like, we think about the hormones that are coming on board, having some irritability or just being human, it would be also expected that we could be irritable and sometimes we get angry. So like it's like what role do those different pieces play in depression, and how can they recognize them as red flags versus like developmentally appropriate
Mhm.
milestones?
Mhm. I think it's helpful to understand Thomas Joiner's interpersonal theory of suicide. He has these ingredients that are the recipe for how suicide can occur. And the three main ingredients that he has is this perceived burdensomeness. So I'm a
Mhm.
burden to my friends, my family, my school, my community. Thwarted sense of belonging. So I don't belong here. I don't belong with my friends, my family, my school, my community, whatever it is. And then this hopelessness, which is kind of
Mhm.
a overarching across the other two. And those three, one additional one is the capability for suicide. So this is the numbingness. So when it doesn't feel so scary, when it doesn't feel so far fetched, we're not scared of suicide. You take kind of those four pieces and you have a really strong recipe for suicide. And so when you're talking about what's normal, what's abnormal, what's developmental, what is depression and suicide, I think holding up the whatever symptoms are being presented with this kind of theory in the background can be
Mhm.
helpful because it's thinking what they're communicating. Do they feel like they're a burden to
Mhm.
me, to our family, to this friend group that they're talking with? Now, how can I help reinforce that they're not a burden and help them believe that in their own schema? And then this sense of belonging, like you belong here with us, you belong in this community. And how can we do things? How can we say things to build that sense of belonging? And then ultimately create hope for the future, for their life, help them see those visions and visualize a future and dreams, and really encourage that, regardless of what they're going through in the moment, because we all go through hard moments. But holding on to hope and curating hope for people is really important when it comes to depression and suicide.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know that you know this, Ethan, about me. So my nephew died by suicide when he was 19. And it was one of those things where it's like, maybe there were some signs, right? Like it just felt very out of the blue.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so like looking at this of like, it wasn't something that he was like, he wasn't really depressed, but I don't know that he had a group, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
but there were people who said after he died, and I think they reported that they were saying this to him is like, he is important to us. Like, we care about him. But I think it's that part of like, I'm a burden,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, I'm doing all these wrong things. Like, I think maybe that was his mindset. And it's like, I wish I could talk to him and be like, okay, download to me. Like, what do I need to know? And what did I miss? Or what could I have asked? Or, and not to say it's like my fault or anybody's fault, right? Like, but that like, is there something that I could have noticed that I could have done differently as your aunt, right? And then as parents. And I think I love this idea of, and maybe it's just that proactively, it's not waiting for those moments, like you said earlier, about like when we're in crisis or when we're in a hard place. And some people are going to be listening to this and we are in a hard place. So I get that we can't go back, but that we can talk about these things. Like, you know, sometimes people feel like they're a burden. Have you ever felt that way? I mean, I know that I personally have, where
Mm,
it's like, I felt like, like I just like have so much going on and I'm always bringing people down. Right? Like, but then it's like, sometimes that passes quickly. Like it's
mm,
like a temporary feeling. And then sometimes it might be longer. Right. So it's okay for us to actually have these conversations where we're talking about the recipe for being more likely to die by suicide or not.
mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think an additional piece that's important is this one on impulsivity. And I
Yeah.
think especially for young men, because like we've been talking about, you may not see signs, there may not be a buildup. And I think that impulsivity kind of ties into one of his pieces in the theory on the capability for suicide, like noticing an increase in risk taking, noticing a lack of regard for physical health. Or I think so often we encourage this like pain tolerance in young men.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, don't feel pain, tough it out. And that can be, there's like a healthy window of that. It can be really helpful for sports. I wrestled in high school, so I get it. Like you have to push through pain, but that taken to the extreme of like, I don't care about my regard, my physical health, my mental health. Like this doesn't feel scary to me anymore. Like that's when you get into that window of, okay, this is a red flag that I should be noticing, and that is where you get to the danger of depression and suicide.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which I think is hard. And so I think, I really truly believe being a parent is the hardest job on the planet. I just can't. I mean, I think there are times where I'm like, I would rather, I don't love yard work. Okay. I like gardening, but not yard work. It's a different thing for me. But like, it's like, I would rather go do yard work than handle this particular challenge we have in front of us. Like, I would like
Mhm.
to, my amygdala is turning on. I'm like, I would
Mhm.
like to flight from this. I would
Mhm.
like to run away from this problem. But I know as a therapist, like, that's not the most supportive thing for my kids or for myself or for my
Mhm.
husband, whoever is, having something that we're navigating through.
Mhm.
And it's hard. I mean, and I think parents have to give themselves grace too of we're all doing the best we can with the information we have and the place that we're at.
Mhm.
And we can still grow. Like there is space for growth and information, which is why people are listening to this podcast to get more information. But I think, giving yourself grace if your kid is in a depressed place, that doesn't mean it's like your fault. You didn't
Mhm.
do that. It's also a function of, I mean, talk to me about biology and depression. Is there a connection between genetics and depression or not? Where are we at with that?
Well, there's definitely some connection. Most commonly, it's a combination of nature and nurture. So there are pieces that it's hard to tease out. Is this biological because I have the same genetics as my
Mhm.
parent, or is this something that I've learned because I was raised by my parents? And
Mhm.
so I think both are helpful and relate to this idea that there are behaviors that get passed down and things
Mhm.
that you'll be more susceptible to because your parents are more susceptible to that.
Yeah. And we're modeling it, right? So, like, how we handle those things too. We're also seeing, like, if we grew up in a home that really helped us to process anger, process emotions as a male, then we're probably going to do a better job within our own homes of doing that. Or we do efforts towards doing a better job. Like, we're more focused on that, then that's probably going to be more easily done. But then if you didn't have that demonstrated, that's going to be really hard because you're fighting against your kind of quote unquote training,
Mhm.
right? Like what you were immersed in as a child, an adolescent, and then adult. And then you came to a realization that this might be something helpful, or you're told it would be helpful, right? And
Mhm.
you're thinking, like, okay, like, I don't know how to do this. Is it okay if parents are stumbling through this?
Oh, absolutely. And the thought on my mind is, I'm not a parent yet until you say like it's one of the hardest things, and I can sympathize for it, but I really can't empathize for it yet. And I'm really excited to one
Hmm.
day be a parent. I think the closest thing I have is I recently got engaged just in July, and but what I'm learning is that whatever relationship, whether that's fiance, husband, wife, child, they will pull out the blind spots in you, and will make you very quickly realize where your weaknesses and flaws are. And
Yes.
I think if you're not in the right spot, that can be really intimidating and really ominous. But if you are doing the work and you have support and structures around you, that can be a real opportunity, because without that, you can kind of just keep going throughout your life
Mm.
with whatever structures and scaffolding that you've created for yourself that may or may not be working. But uh, again, not having firsthand experience of having kids, but hearing about other people's experience and working with parents, I've learned that it's a real opportunity to highlight where your blind spots are and where you have an opportunity to dig into that,
Yeah.
learn. And that's where you have to go back to that vulnerability piece, realize that you're human too. You're not
Mhm.
perfect. You're going to make mistakes. And some conversations I've had with dads that are some of the most rewarding ones are the ones when they are able to say, like, I'm sorry to their kid. And
Mhm.
like, that was a really hard moment and really uh, contradicted how they were raised, and they really didn't want to, but they leaned into that discomfort, and they were vulnerable, and they apologized. And that's part of that healing work that I think will make that much more of a difference for their child.
Absolutely. Two things I wanted to say to that. Well, actually three. One, congratulations
Thank you.
on getting engaged. What an exciting endeavor. Two is I think, yes, parenting is definitely the hardest job and also the most rewarding. Like, I think it's hard to explain. Like, it's worth all the struggle. And yeah, it's hard and challenging you, but it's like the people who know you best are going to push you the hardest. But like not in a malicious way is what I'm imagining. Is like my kids, I joke that I'm in clinical still, right? Like I finished that a long time ago, but I am still learning, right? And as soon as I feel like I have figured things out, I'm like, okay, we got a routine here. And then, right, like developmentally, they're maturing, something changes, right? Like whatever it is, they try a new activity. I mean, it totally shifts the household dynamic sometimes, right? And so it's like, okay, I'm back at the drawing board, or like, okay, I thought I had that figured out. Like that was good, but then the problem doesn't resolve, or like I have to try a new skill. So I think even as somebody who is trained as a therapist, but also I've been a parent for 13 years. I mean, like I'm still learning. Like this
Mhm.
is it doesn't I don't have all the information, right? Like I'm still growing and every kid is different, but I do think we can find themes and different things to look at. And then there was a third thing I was going to say to you. Hmm. Which was now I can't remember. Dang it. I hate it when I get to three. It was like my max of what I can remember. It will come to me. But I think it's so I'm sorry. That's what it was. I was thinking about the softness that comes from somebody owning the part. And I think I'm sorry, sometimes a lot of times, especially dads, I mean, but there's moms out there too and kids who don't want to apologize. But I think it's about feeling that you're bad instead of the thing that you did was not great or bad, and that you don't have that doesn't become you. You're your own person. We can just
Mhm.
all make bad choices. But then also like the growth, like it's almost like rocket fuel on your relationship to own your part of how you messed up, because it just propels you to each other because you feel like you can be authentically yourself and vulnerable yourself, right? But if your parents not being vulnerable, it's really hard to be like, here's the places that are sucking for me in life.
Mhm.
You feel like you have to hide it all or protect it
Mhm.
all, or like, you have a C or an F in one of your classes and you're like, oh my gosh, my parents are going to die if they see this, and you just keep trying to hide it, right?
Mhm.
Like kind of like, I don't know if you've ever had cats, like when they use the restroom they cover everything up, right?
Mhm.
So it's like, but that's not helpful, right? Like in terms of for cats is with bathroom stuff, but with emotions and experiences and needing help is normal. That's
Mhm.
expected. Nobody can do everything themselves.
Mhm. I don't know if it's just my social media feed because I'm passionate about this, but I see tons of reels about guys talking about most impactful men in their lives, and
Yeah.
most often it's these men who have this tenderness characteristic to them. I think that same applies to my life. The reason that it's so impactful is because it's so unique to have this tenderness to you. And when you first said that word tenderness, it made me think, I think it was like Teddy Roosevelt that said, speak softly and carry a big stick. I think so many people hear that and they rush to the big stick piece, like, oh, I'm going to go get huge and I'm going to make money and I'm going to be ready to provide and protect. But they skip over that first piece, which is the speak softly, and they don't learn how to communicate that tenderness and to have that internal tenderness so that they can share it with other people. And I think it's something that's equally as important for young men today.
Yeah. Well, and I think if you're starting today, you already have a teenager or a young adult, like you can say like, hey, I'm going to try something different. As a parent, I'm going to try something different. This may work. It may not work. We both may love this. We both may not love this. Like it might be uncomfortable. But this is what I'm going to try. I'm going to show up differently. This is how. And I think that part of saying to your kids, whether they're male or female, like to just say, I'm learning something and I'm going to try this thing and let's see how it goes. You let me know what you think.
Mm-hmm. A perfect example of that is my great uncle Bill, who helped my dad when my dad was in college. My dad was going to Michigan State University. He was 19, 20 years old. He needed a job. So he went to work for his uncle Bill, and they were pouring concrete, doing brick mason work. And he was just like this hard guy, like worked long hours, was strict, was unforgiving. And my dad said that like it was rewarding. He learned work ethic, but it was also like really hard, kind of traumatic. Like he's like, I don't know if I would go back and do that again. And then when I got to high school, I needed a summer job, and my dad was like, "Oh, I'm gonna go send you to work for Uncle Bill." And so he sent me out there, and I came home, and my dad's like, "So how was it?" Like thinking, "Did it suck?" And I was like, "It was great." And he's like, "What do you mean it was great?" It's like we worked a little bit, but then we sat and we had some really good conversations. We went to Burger King, we had a burger, and my dad was just like flabbergasted because it was just like that change. And I think we see it a lot with men over the lifespan. Like they get to this grandpa age, and all of a sudden it's okay to be tender and nice, but there's this like middle-aged part where it's unacceptable in this range to show vulnerability and tenderness. But to have that tenderness from my Uncle Bill was really special, and like I look to him as a male role model in my life. So I think that speaks to how it's possible to shift from that super hard, rigid to I'm going to try something different here with this relationship.
Mm-hmm. And we don't have to wait, right? I think I love the idea. And I do think that that is very true, that there is a tenderness, especially like grandkids or like there's something different about that relationship. I think in general, grandparenting, right? Like that's a different relationship than parenting than like aunt, uncling. Like, but yeah, I think, there's like more responsibility, but like the responsibility is also this vulnerability piece, I think is what we're trying to impress. Is just like, vulnerability is also one of the pillars of parenting, is being able to be yourself and share those things. So what do you think are the like recipes for creating a safe environment for kids to be vulnerable or to open up to their parents, and maybe sometimes it's not their parents, maybe it's a close family friend or somebody else? Like, how do we create this environment, ideally within our homes, for our kids to open up, especially our boys, to say, I need help, or I'm feeling this way, or I'm failing at this, or I don't know how to handle this situation?
Two things come to mind. I think modeling it, something we've kind of been talking about today, but then also really listening, like listening well. I think part of what I love about the therapy space is the unique features of listening that really occur where there's no phones, there's no judgment. They can really say anything and know that they're going to be heard. And like literally being trained, spending money to learn how to be really good listeners. And so I don't undermine that, but I think it's something that anybody can learn how to do. And it's pretty easy to not do a good job of listening today when we have phones and we have other kids and we have responsibilities. Like someone could be sitting right in front of you telling you something, you go, oh yeah, I'm listening, but not really present. They're listening. So when someone is really listening, like that, you can tell, and that has an impact on you. And so I think listening and modeling it, sometimes you have to go first. So after my brother passed away, he passed away in March, and in May I went on a college May term, took a class, and we went to Alaska, and it was like 2 weeks there. And one of the first nights we were sitting around the campfire, and there were some advisors, and throughout the week they give different prompts on things to talk about, but they're like, the first night we're just going to let people, chit chat, have fun. I wasn't expecting it to get too deep. And they're like, so what do you guys want to talk about? And I was like, what if we share something that's like not on your resume, something deep? And I was like, I'll go first. And so I shared how I had just lost my brother to suicide, and ended up having one of our deepest conversations the first night of the trip. And the advisors later were like, I think that group was like one of the most emotionally connected and went the deepest. And I think it stemmed from volunteering that vulnerability early on. So we have to model it. Sometimes we have to go first because it's uncomfortable for everybody. So recognizing that, taking that leap of faith, modeling it, and then active listening. I think those two things come to mind right away.
Okay, so talk to me about active listening. Like we say, it's really easy to not listen. How do we actively listen? Like, what are the ways that we do that? How do we show that?
Well, there are verbal and nonverbal cues, of course. So there are things that you can repeat to show that you can listen, or summaries, affirmation, things like that. Nonverbal cues, making eye contact, a smile, or reciprocating empathy, nodding along. But I think beyond those pieces, a really important underlying piece, I think is really hard to do, takes practice, is to not have your next thought or judgment already stirring or being produced in you. Because I think the minute that someone starts talking and you're like, okay, connection, boop, boop, I know I'm going to say next, I'm going to connect this, here's how I'm going to respond, you've missed the second half of what they were saying. So I think one of the distinctions between like good listeners who know the nonverbal and verbal cues and like the really great listeners are the ones who don't have an agenda, don't have something kind of set or a quick debate or respond that they're going to have, but they, maybe marinate's the right word, but they really just like sit in what you're saying, listen to it, take time to respond. And that response is like, whoa, that I can tell you're really listening.
Yes. Which I think is so important. I think just thinking as an adult, but like as a teenager, like somebody who really listened to what I had to say, even if it was contrary to what they felt or thought I should be doing or whatever the circumstances are, like that was so meaningful. Even if at the end of the conversation, it was like a agree to disagree kind of deal, right? Like we both heard each other out. And I think as soon as you feel not heard, like they're not really listening, you kind of turn off because it's like, this isn't worth the risk, or it's not worth the reward that's coming out of this is not what I'm looking for. And so then often we shut down, but it doesn't mean we have to agree with what our kids are saying. They might say something and you might offer like, have you thought about it this way? Or could I offer a suggestion? Or are you open to feedback? Right. And so I think, sometimes it's about just like asking for that permission. And I find that with my kids, especially my 13-year-old, when I say things like, can I give you some ideas, or like, can I offer some suggestions I had, or things that I know other kids have tried? And if he says no, that's a like another day conversation, right? Or later, right? Can I follow back up on that? It doesn't mean you have to let it go. But I really try to give autonomy in that part. And then when he says yes, like, yeah, I'll hear, then he really actually listens. If I keep talking and I haven't asked, or even he says no, but I'm like, I have to say this anyways. I don't know. It's kind of like in the Snoopy things where the teacher's talking. It's like, wah, wah, right? Like, I don't think anything's really heard.
Yeah. Parenting is so unique. And I just think about all of the different family systems that I've kind of experienced, like single parent households and separated, divorced, whatever it is. And so I think part of that active listening involves like listening to what's going on when there's a problem, like not coming in with, oh, I have the solution to fix your family. If you guys just have your family meetings and you talk this way, then everything will work out. But I think this active listening applies to whoever I'm sitting across from, like really hearing what's going on, because that ability to actively listen in itself is like a form of therapy, is therapeutic and is helpful for people. And so learning that skill of active listening, whoever it is, I think it's underrated.
Yes, for sure. And I like you say that everybody can learn it. Like it's not something that like you need a certain degree or you have to be a certain age or right. Like I think it's really zero entry maybe, right? Like I think you obviously have to learn the skills. You have to be interested, but it's not something that it requires a ton of training. I think you can read on it, practice it, and become good at that skill if you want to, which is helpful. Okay, so I'm thinking back to just like depression and teenage boys and thinking about how like, you know, as much as we would like it to just be the home, there's so many other supports potentially and also influences in our teenagers' lives, school, community, you know, and obviously our homes. What do you think are the most effective things that those different entities can do with teenage boys that we've identified they are struggling with depression? What then? Like, how can the schools support it? What can community do at a broader level?
One of the things I've been kind of teasing apart with a colleague of mine named Leslie Wyrick, and she's a suicide prevention advocate, also lost her son, whose name was also Austin. So we have connected on that, and then we've gone on to do some live events together and hash out ideas together. But we talk about, so if there is a recipe for suicide, what is the recipe for suicide prevention? And we have these 3 Ps. And, originally, it was 3 people in 3 places. And so that's having 3 people in your phone that you can contact when you're having a bad day, when you're struggling. Could be a family member, could be a friend, a cousin, whoever it is. In the research, one of the leading factors for preventing suicide is non-parental role models. So having people in your life outside of your immediate parents and family that you feel comfortable, safe enough talking to. That's a guidance counselor at school, a teacher, a coach. Like, I want to make it clear that their roles are really important, especially for people who are struggling. Like having those mentors is so crucial. So having 3 people in your phone. And then I've even gone deeper into like, okay, what are the types of people? So a coach is kind of like the people we were just talking about, the literal sports coaches, but also can be the teachers. And then the teammate, the people who are on your side, who are running the race with you, classmates, family members, brothers, sisters, and then the cheerleader, who is someone that is cheering you on no matter what. Maybe that's your parent. For me, it's my mom, but whoever that is, an aunt, an uncle, a friend. Those are 3 types of people that you can kind of use to guide who are the 3 people in your life. And then 3 places that you can go. I think the pandemic really minimized that, kind of took away our sense of having different places. We went from having different places to doing everything at home, working from home, doing school from home, exercising at home, eating at home. And we need those places because they provide for different parts of our life. So again, when I try to get into more detail, get more granular about what are 3 places, having a place for your mind, for your brain, somewhere that you can go to learn, whether that's a school or library or coffee shop or whatever that is. Having a place for your heart, somewhere that is a comfort place, feels good, whether it's the bowling alley or your home or a comfortable place, a park, a beach, somewhere that you go that just like fills your heart. It's a comfortable place. And then a place for your soul, somewhere that you can go and kind of wrestle with these deeper questions, or that's church or a friend's house, or somewhere that you can go and talk to somebody, in a therapist's office, something like that. So I think having 3 places is really important. And so I was hashing out those details, and I was thinking about my brother Austin, and I was like, I really believe he had those things. He had 3 people, probably more people. He was on the high school tennis team. He had coaches. He had friends. He had family that loved him. He had places that he could go, school, church, home. I was like, what can be missing there? And so I think recently I've added these 3 pillars. I think having 3 pillars is really important. And what I mean by that are, what are the values that keep you grounded and kind of anchor you when the storms come up? And so you can think about your family name. What does your last name mean to you? What does it mean to be a Getchell? What are the 3 pillars of being a Getchell? I think about the places that pillars were first given to me in high school on the wrestling team. It was the first time. It was mental, moral, physical. And so whatever situation came up for me in high school, that was so ingrained in me that I could approach it and think about, how am I doing mentally, physically, morally? What does that mean to me? And then I got to college and I joined a fraternity, again, a group of guys, and their pillars were service, love, and wisdom. And so I had these pillars to approach conflict and how I wanted to show up at my campus and with friends. And so having 3 pillars, it helps with that, not only the lack of perceived burdensomeness, but also with that hopelessness or lack of sense of purpose. When you have 3 pillars, it keeps you grounded and helps you know, okay, this is my purpose. I can say it in 3 words. So having 3 people, 3 places, and 3 pillars, I think is a start. It's an initial recipe for suicide prevention and people who are struggling with depression.
Yeah. I mean, so thinking as somebody who has a kid, they're like, okay, we talked with them about like how important it is to have these 3 people, 3 places, and we had them come up with 3 pillars or help them come up with that. What do you do then? Like, if you're like, okay, so my kid is still struggling with depression, obviously a therapist is a great thing, like if we're finding ourselves in this place and we're not able to kind of like find a way forward, or we feel kind of like stuck or trapped, getting into therapy or seeing your pediatrician is obviously a good step forward too. But how do we help them like lean into those pillars, right? So like they are feeling their burden, right? But they have 3 great pillars. You said service, love, and wisdom. Like, let's say those are the 3 pillars that they've come up with. And it's like, but I feel like a burden. Like, how do you guide them through that piece?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's hard without having a specific example to
Sure.
like know how to specifically help here. But I feel like a lot broadly, it would be kind of stress testing these pillars, like going out, understanding when conflict arises, having that underlying safe place, would have that conversation. You have the active listening. You have all these pieces that we've previously been talking about. They go out, they come back, and they share, yeah, I'm still feeling this way. Then it's kind of reiterating back what they've shared with you, instead of trying to apply your philosophy onto them or saying what you think is right for them, having them do these 3 Ps laid out. Instead, you're sharing back what they've shared with you. And so you're kind of reinforcing it. So at first, you're kind of a sounding board for them. You're able to share with them their values when they can't even call upon it themselves, with the goal that, if you say this to them enough times, that they'll start to believe it. And that's a lot of, like, in therapy, there's the core beliefs in the schema work to identify where the unhelpful core beliefs are coming into play, the automatic negative thoughts that you might not be aware of, and that might be kind of eating away at you. And when you say that this is a negative thought here, here's something that you have identified as more helpful. How can you apply that here into this situation and build that sense of autonomy in them having this stronger sense of self based on the things that they've identified with the 3 Ps.
Yeah. I think it's hard. This is a hard space to be in, but we don't have to know it all. We don't have to do it all. And we can also lean on our 3P things too, right? So we as parents are also going to have our people and our places and our pillars of like what we're doing as well. And so sometimes it's like, I say every good therapist has a therapist. So I think, that because we're fallible, like we're not perfect and we don't know everything, and we're doing life at the same time that everybody else is also doing life. And so we need support as well. And so it's like, it's good for parents to have support. So to have people to lean on too. But I think these fundamental things that you've talked about are really helpful. Is there anything else that you would want a parent to kind of leave this conversation with that does have a teenager that is struggling with depression?
Yeah, I think summarizing what we've shared today, like we're all fallible human beings. We're going to make mistakes. It's hard, especially as parents, not to take that personally or feel like you're failing because your child is feeling a certain way or doing certain things. So I think there's understanding that piece. But then this piece on cultivating hope, I think is really important. Like if you do nothing else, like I think one of the sayings is, it doesn't matter what you say or do, it matters how you make someone feel, like they remember how you make them feel. So whether it's active listening or you're telling someone something, like leaving them with the feeling of hope, I think is my goal. And I think is one that I would encourage parents to do. How are we encouraging, inspiring hope in our children, being that lighthouse for them in the darkness and providing hope?
Yeah. Amazing. Ethan, thank you so much for this conversation. It has been so helpful.
Thanks for having me. I love talking about it.
Thanks again, Ethan. We're so thankful for your wisdom and knowledge and how you're taking the loss of your brother and turning it into something great and making it so that other people know things that they can do to support their kids, especially our males, and navigating depression and suicidal ideation. And thank you. I mean, I can't say it enough. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I hope that you took a lot away from this conversation and are able to implement some of the things that Ethan and I talked about today. With that, I will say thank you so much for your time. If you would take a moment and subscribe to our show, and if you think that this topic would be beneficial, and let's be honest, every parent who is raising boys could benefit from this topic because we're all still learning. If you would share this with friends, we would greatly appreciate it. Not only do we just want to get the information out there, but it also helps people to get to information in other episodes. So we would definitely appreciate you sharing this episode with somebody that you think would benefit. If you would also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, and keep the emails coming, guys. I love the topic requests to accidentalexperts@gmail.com. Have a wonderful day.
Some words from our legal team.
The information presented in this podcast is not intended or implied to be a substitute for appropriate professional advice, diagnosis, or treatment. All content, including text, graphics, images, and information contained on or available through this podcast, is for general information purposes only. This podcast makes no representations and assumes no responsibility for the accuracy or information on or available through this podcast, and such information is subject to change without notice. You are encouraged to confirm any information obtained through this program with other sources and review all information regarding any condition or treatment with the appropriate professionals.
What we're saying is, yes, I am a real therapist, but I'm not your therapist.